Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Thursday, November 14th, 2024. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, Trump's AG pick Matt Gaetz, Robert Menendez's trial error, Gary Wang's fraud detection tool, New York's Ivory law overturned, and law firms' revenue surge. Let's remember, don't worry about failures. You need only be right once, preferably before dinner, and read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, November 14th, 1881, Charles Guiteau stood trial for assassinating President James A. Garfield. Garfield had been shot by Guiteau in July of that year, but succumbed to his injuries months later, largely due to medical mismanagement. At the time, sterilization practices were not widely understood or practiced, and Garfield's doctors repeatedly probed his wound with unwashed instruments and hands, leading to a fatal infection. Despite the role of inadequate medical care, Guiteau was held fully responsible for the president's death, setting a notable precedent in criminal law. Guiteau's defense centered on claims of insanity, arguing that he believed he was acting on divine command to remove Garfield. His erratic behavior in court, which included singing, reciting poetry, and accusing his defense attorneys of incompetence, underscored his unstable mental state. However, 19th-century legal standards for insanity were narrow and rarely accepted by courts. The prosecution argued that Guiteau understood the wrongfulness of his act, and he was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to death. The case spotlighted serious deficiencies in the legal system's treatment of mental illness and brought attention to the need for clearer guidelines on the insanity defense. It also ignited a broader conversation on the role of medical practices in causation, as some questioned whether Guiteau could be solely responsible for Garfield's death. Guiteau's trial and conviction marked one of the first high-profile uses of the insanity defense in the United States and influenced subsequent legal reforms regarding both mental health assessments and standards of criminal responsibility. President-elect Donald Trump has named Matt Gaetz, a nutjob Republican congressman with a face that might terrify even the devil himself, as his nominee for Attorney General. Gaetz, who has previously faced scrutiny from the Justice Department over sex trafficking allegations, will replace current leadership to help Trump, quote, end weaponized government and enact an aggressive conservative agenda. Gaetz, who resigned from Congress immediately, is known for his unconventional political moves, including his role in ousting former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and for his call to dismantle federal agencies like the FBI. His appointment has already triggered controversy, with Senate Republicans like Lisa Murkowski expressing skepticism about his qualifications and intentions. Gaetz' background has raised security clearance concerns given the history of investigations into his conduct. The nomination aligns with Trump's stated intentions to reshape the Justice Department, positioning the Attorney General as crucial to plans for mass deportations, pardons of January 6th rioters, and prosecutorial retribution. Gaetz' legal experience consists mainly of work at a Florida law firm before he entered politics, though he has recently championed populist stances on antitrust enforcement, supporting the Federal Trade Commission's fight against non-compete clauses and cheering the Justice Department's antitrust case against Google. Gaetz' nomination fuels concern among former Justice Department officials who fear that he could further politicize an institution traditionally independent from White House influence. In the corruption trial of former Democratic Senator Robert Menendez, prosecutors revealed that jurors were mistakenly showed unredacted evidence during deliberations. However, they argued this error does not warrant overturning the conviction, asserting that the evidence against Menendez was overwhelming. Menendez, a former New Jersey senator, was convicted in August of corruption charges that included accepting bribes like gold bars and cash, allegedly in exchange for political favors. He has maintained his innocence and plans to appeal. The Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office indicated that both the defense and prosecution missed the unredacted material during trial, emphasizing that it likely did not affect the jury's guilty verdict on all 16 counts, including wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and illegal foreign agency activities. Menendez, once a senior figure in the Senate as the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, now faces sentencing in January with a potential for decades in prison. Gary Wang, former chief technology officer of FTX, is assisting federal prosecutors by developing software to detect fraud in both stock and cryptocurrency markets. Wang, who had previously wrote the code allowing ex-FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried to siphon billions from FTX customers, has been cooperating with the government since FTX's collapse. Prosecutors are asking for leniency in Wang's upcoming sentencing, highlighting his proactive efforts to prevent similar crimes. His new tool, details of which remain confidential to protect its effectiveness, is valued by prosecutors for its potential in identifying financial crimes. This cooperation follows Bankman-Fried's recent 25-year prison sentence for fraud and misuse of $8 billion in customer funds, while the other former FTX associates like Carolyn Ellison and Nishad Singh received lighter sentences due to their cooperation. Wang, the last of Bankman-Fried's close associates awaiting sentencing, was instrumental in exposing the scheme by testifying that Bankman-Fried directed him to alter FTX's code to grant Alameda Research unauthorized access to customer funds. A federal appeals court has struck down a New York law that heavily restricted antiques dealers from selling or displaying ivory and rhinoceros horn items, ruling it unconstitutional. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found that the law, which limited ivory content in antiques to less than 20%, overstepped by restricting dealers' First Amendment commercial speech rights. Judges argued that the law prevented dealers from communicating important details about legally marketable items, deeming this an excessive speech restriction. While federal law already restricts ivory sales under the Endangered Species Act, it allows for goods with up to 50% ivory, whereas New York's stricter limit of 20% was intended to curb poaching of endangered species. However, the court ruled that New York's law also blocked the sale of items permitted in interstate and international trade, making it too broad. The decision was a setback for animal rights groups that supported the law to protect vulnerable wildlife, although the Humane Society noted that New York could still enforce the law against local buyers. Law firm revenues surged nearly 12% in the first 3 quarters of the year, driven by increased demand for legal services and higher productivity, according to Citi's law firm banking group. The top 50 law firms saw especially notable gains, with revenues up 14%, demand growth at 3.6%, and productivity rising by 2.9%. Industry-wide demand rose by 3.2%, with lawyer productivity improving as headcount growth slowed to 1.3%, returning to historical norms. Legal services demand spanned diverse practice areas, notably in litigation, regulatory issues, investment management, and bankruptcy. Although transactional demand has been quiet, experts anticipate a rebound in mergers and acquisitions activity. Law firms also invested in technology upgrades, including new practice management tools and generative AI, which contributed to higher expenses. And with that, and as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment, leave a rating or review on your podcast player. We'd appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly not that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, if you stumble, make it part of the dance. Bonus points if you add jazz hands.